Welcome to The Scholar's Guide, a podcast where we explore powerful stories of how access to opportunity and strong community transforms lives. I'm your host, Brianna Brown, and founder of the B&B Foundation, a nonprofit organization focused on empowering tomorrow's leaders to meet their full potential in college and beyond. So, Brian, thank you so much for being here today in the dojo and for joining us on The Scholar's Guide today.
Thanks for having me.
Ooh, so we're going to talk a little bit about your experiences leading into your medical career. So why don't you just start with the beginning? Tell us a little bit about yourself, where you grew up, and what you think made you interested in pursuing medicine.
Sounds good. So going way back.
Yes.
So I'm from Spring Valley, New York, born and raised there. Big Haitian family, parent of immigrants. So growing up, I always liked math and science. That was kind of the subjects I gravitated towards. And so I feel like medicine was always one of the options I was considering. There's other things too. But then I think a big influence was my mom went to nursing school while we were growing up. So I watched her go from, doing one job to then going back to school part-time, becoming a nurse. She would bring home like anatomy textbooks, stethoscopes. I would find that kind of stuff really interesting and like to look through it.
Is this in high school or?
No, this is elementary.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
I could maybe show a picture that we could put on the thing after. About me at my mom's graduation from nursing school. But it's super early on. So I think medicine was something I had a thought about. And then in high school, I remember one year we had to pick a project to do a career about. And I was like, I'll pick medicine. Interviewed my pediatrician and some, I think a pre-med at the time, which felt like such an old person to me at the time. But now it's like, oh, I was just a kid that I interviewed for a project. But yeah, so I was really interested in medicine the whole time, kind of did more exploring, seeing what I liked about it, what I didn't like about it. And then when I got to medical school, I did more when I got to undergrad, I did more shadowing, more like volunteer experiences that were in clinical settings to kind of solidify that medicine was what I wanted to do.
So it was kind of like a growing progression. You just learned a little bit more about it. And as opposed to because I feel like some people's stories have a lot to do with like a family member that was sick or something, and that kind of led them to explore a particular field. But this was kind of just gradually. And your mom, who was in the nursing field.
Yeah, I think my mom being in a medical field was like a big inspiration. I grew up with my grandparents, so both of my mom's parents were in our house too. So they were overall okay with their health, but they did have some hospitalizations, some health issues. And it was cool to see how doctors helped bring them right back home, back to themselves. So I think that having a pediatrician that I looked up to and liked, and, I wasn't scared of going to the doctor's office. I think all those things kind of played a role. So it wasn't one experience, but I think it was seeing role models potentially doing something related to what I want to do. And then also just seeing that it's an important job that has like a good impact on people's lives. So it's like my way of applying the subjects I like to something impactful for the world or for myself. So
Right. No, that makes sense. And I love what you said about you not being like afraid of the doctor's office. Because I think there's a lot of people who, because there's just terminology that they don't understand or they're just not familiar with it. My mom is also a nurse. Like Caribbean nurses will take over. But I grew up going to the hospital a lot too, spending the night there and just feeling a little bit more comfortable with it. So that's awesome. Now, medicine is obviously like a very, what's the word I'm looking for? Like, you have to be kind of in it. Like, it is a journey.
It's a journey.
So can you tell us about maybe what you thought that journey was going to be like when you were in high school, maybe early, like freshman, sophomore college, versus like what it's actually been for you now?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I think it's a very set path, which is there's pros and cons to it. So I think as someone who I'm not the most I'm kind of risk averse in general. So it's nice to have a very clean pathway to know, like, here's the steps I got to do. I got to do high school, undergrad, med school, residency, and then maybe other training. I'll be done. So I kind of had a general layout of the pathway before I went into it and kind of knew what to expect. I took some extra time to do different things along the way, which I can talk more about. But like, for example, I did a master's degree during medical school, so that extended the time a little bit. Did some research, like a research track during my training now. I'm still in training, by the way, which you can get to also. So it's been a long time. Yeah, it'll put that in perspective, right? So on one hand, it's a very clear pathway. There's not that many surprises. But then on the other hand, you don't really know what it's going to be like until you do it. So like, I know the amount of time I got to do, but I don't know what it's like to be a medical student or a resident or a fellow until you're there. And these are terms that I can also explain. But so it's kind of a mix of both. Like I knew, because you can just look it up, you can Google it, it'll tell you what you need to do for training, but living that experience is a little bit different.
Okay. All right. Gotcha. So let's maybe start. You're graduating from high school. You're about to enter the school that you went to, which you get introduced,
Harvard, yeah.
right? Yes.
Very lucky to go there.
And yes, awesome. And you end up doing is biomedical engineering.
Yep.
Right. So why biomed and not like any other major?
So I thought about chemistry. It was between chemistry and biomedical engineering. I think just one thing to mention is some people think you got to major in pre-med or something like that's a major. A lot of schools don't even have a pre-med major, but on top of that, I'm a big fan and advocate of doing what you actually think is an interesting subject and just doing the pre-med requirements along the way. So sure, you got to do your bio, your chem, your math, English, whatever the requirements are, but you don't have to make your whole identity pre-med. You can study English, you can study biology, you can study math. So for me, I was just like, I liked chemistry, I liked physics, I liked science, like I said, science and math. And so it was really between chemistry because I thought the classes that were at Harvard for chemistry were really like robust, well taught, really cool subject. And then bioengineering I thought was like more applied, had some really cool like you're not just like learning the fundamentals, but how to apply it to like make something or build something or design something. And so I just gravitated towards that a little bit more.
Did you think that you were going to do something in engineering
Yeah.
at any point?
Yeah. So kind of to the point about like there wasn't one moment where medicine was for sure like this is what I'm definitely going to do and it's because of this one thing. I kept my mind open. I think that's important. I think even though if you asked me going to high school, I would probably talk about medicine as one of the top things that I wanted to do, but I'm like, I'm here 4 years. I should see some other things I've never really explored or thought about another career. So the two alternatives I had thought about at some point was one, getting a job and working at like a pharmaceutical or a biotech company, or two was to actually go to grad school but for a PhD to like get further training in biomedical engineering, also some research experience, so that I could be either better suited for an industry type job or for an academic biomedical engineering job. So that was kind of the pathway. I was like, pre-med is one thing, but there's some other cool things I could do with this.
I think that's really powerful because it's like you're creating almost like a safety net for yourself, or like giving yourself alternate options. If maybe not necessarily that it doesn't work out, but if you choose something else.
Yeah.
So along the way, what kind of said, you know what? No, I'm gonna go to med school. Like what? Maybe talk about some of the opportunities or the experiences that you had that kind of pushed you towards the path that you're on now.
Yeah. So I'll just, one thing about the safety net that I want to mention, because it's kind of funny. I feel like I still spent a lot of time navigating the Caribbean parents' influence, right? So they're very into practical things. Even the decision between chemistry and bioengineering, it was like, what job are you going to do with chemistry? If you decide to do that, I'm like, I don't know, I'll figure it out. And so I feel like I, try to avoid it, but it is what it is. You do have some influence from your parents one way or another, and they just care about you and want you to, be secure in your career. So I think I was like, okay, maybe bioengineering is a little more practical than chemistry. And so that it was kind of like a backup in that sense. But in terms of what like convinced me to do medicine, I think there was two aspects of it. So one is I would do some shadowing with physicians that I was set up with through school. There's like a pre-med career advising office, and you can kind of get mentors and assigned to shadow people and get just more experience with actually taking care of patients, or at least not directly taking care of patients, but being around people who are taking care of patients. And so I think it showed me that, hey, I actually could do this. It's something that I enjoy in practice, not just in thought. But then the other thing was I learned that medicine can be a lot more diverse of a career than you think. Like growing up, you go to the doctor's office, you probably know this one specific setting of, a physician who has a clinic, and you go there, you see patients all day, and then they go home, and that's kind of their job. But being at Harvard and being in an academic center, you learn that a lot of people who are in medicine also do research or education, or have big roles with mentorship, or there's like something else you can tie into your career. So I think the itch that I had to, when I was thinking about grad school, and I was like, oh, it'd be cool to like do research and work on projects and have my own ideas and try to come up with something. I learned I could still do that in medicine. It's not like it's not something that's going to be excluded from my career. So medicine, ended up being the perfect balance of like I could teach, I could do research, and I could take care of patients. And I think, there's no other field that lets you do all three of those things. And so I went in there with the idea that I would be an academic physician who can kind of do all these interests simultaneously.
Okay. Wow. That's awesome. And I don't think, I mean, you and I have known each other for a really long time. And I'll always say that I have very few friends in my life who I'm like, who knew that this was the thing that they wanted to do. And they went for it and they figured out their own path within it. So I think that's great. That you're able to do that. So I guess jumping back to Harvard, you've made this decision. What is that process like? I guess maybe that junior year, before taking the next step to apply to medical school.
So there's a lot of practical stuff that you have to do. So there is a list of required courses you need to take before going to med school, and then you have to take the MCAT, which is I don't even know what it stands for anymore, but it's like the medical entrance assessment exam. So you need to study for that exam and then also do the prereqs. So even if you decide to major in English, let's say, you still got to make sure in the back of your mind you're getting through the requirements in a timely manner so that you can finish your requirements before you graduate.
Right.
Some people, decide later that they want to go to medical school, and that's fine. There's other programs that exist after undergrad. They're called post-bacs, where you could still do the pre-med requirements. But if your goal is to go to med school right after undergrad, you just got to keep in mind, I got to get through these requirements, and you take a couple of them every year so that you're gradually making your way through the requirements before you graduate. And then I took the MCAT, which is the exam that you need to take to get into med school. It's like the SATs, but the med school version. I took that in my junior year, I believe, at the end of the junior year, because then I was applying to medical school the summer between junior and senior year of college.
So at any point, were you ever maybe questioning whether this was the right path for you? And if so, what, I guess, then encouraged you to keep going?
There's a lot of bumps in the road, I think. There's, first of all, again, the pathway is very long. So I think sometimes half jokingly, but sometimes there is a bit of, it's frustrating that it takes so long to get through the training. And so sometimes I'm like, I'm still here. I'm still in training. And I think what gets me through it, or what people have told me that has been very helpful, is to view training as just like, you are living your life right now. You're not delaying your life till the end of something. So instead of viewing it as like, once I get done with this stage, I will then be able to enjoy X, Y, or Z. I'm like, no, I'm just living my life in the meantime, and this is the job I get to do. And, to be fair, you're still working. You're getting paid. After medical school, you're no longer just paying tuition to learn. You're working and being trained at the same time, and you're getting a salary at the same time. So, I've been fortunate enough to not worry about money. I've been able to support myself, still travel, still, buy things that I want, still enjoy my life outside of work. So I think just reminding myself, like, life still happens now. It's not something I'm waiting to finish all this and then begin at the end.
Yeah, like, it's the journey, and it's about enjoying it along the way. Absolutely. Yeah. And I love the framing almost from school to training, to thinking about it like that way. And personally, like, I'm considering going back to school, and I'm already like, oh my God, on the test. But thinking about it from a way of like, no, there's a set of things that I want to be able to learn, like, and it's there to prepare me for that. So
exactly,
I really love that. So jumping back maybe to mentorship, and to some folks that maybe were role models for you, or that you were like, hey, this might actually be something for me. Maybe talk a little bit about who those people were in your life, and what they instilled in you.
So I think there's like two sets of mentors. So one is peer mentorship, and then the other is sort of someone who's further down and you're in the career that you want to be in. And I think they're both very helpful. So I think like the near peers are super helpful in just the very practical stuff. Like if a freshman in college asked me today about like what best schedule they should have for the next year in terms of their college courses, I'm probably not the best person. It's been a little bit of time, and probably better off talking to someone specifically at their school who's maybe a year or two ahead of them. So I think having someone who knows the context you're in, has had experience very recently in that context, and can kind of give you like the real deal on things, real take on things. So in high school, there are definitely people in the year ahead of me. There's like this whole group of kids they're super smart, but also super cool, super personable. And I feel like they were my go-to people for like college application advice. Then you get to, undergrad, and then luckily there's organizations at schools, like clubs that are run by students, where there are seniors who are either applying or who just got into medical school, who can give advice about like, here's what I wish I knew just a couple years ago to set this up better. Yeah. And then I think when you get to medical schools, when you really get the most exposure to actually people who are further in the career, because you're doing a lot of clinical rotations where you're working in the hospital. You're seeing doctors who are, well into their careers, or, maybe they're in their 40s, 50s, or 60s, but they're, way further than you are and where you want to be. And you can kind of see, like, who do I want to be like, and then try to figure out how to get there. And I learned it's okay to just ask them questions, like, straight up about, what do you wish you knew at my stage? Do you have any advice for me? Like, oh, I'm really interested in how you see patients, but also, you're involved in teaching. Like, how do you balance the two? What are some practical considerations for that? So I've set up meetings over the years with just people that I look up to and just pick their brains, honestly. And it's been very helpful, I think, to give me some context when I'm a little bit unsure about the best next steps, or just have some questions about how to do something.
That's great. And I think mentorship is so important. And I think there's a concept around like reverse mentorship, which is some of that peer relationship that you're talking about, that I think is so important. And even if it's not medicine, being able to kind of network, what do they call it? Like network alongside. Network across. I think that's it. It's just as important as networking up, because first of all, some of those people will stay with you, and you never know, like 10 years from now, that person might be able to open up a door or just give you perspective on something else, like an industry that they're in that you might be wanting to go into. So that's really thoughtful. Thank you for sharing that. So thinking about additional resources, were there any, you mentioned clubs, you mentioned mentorship. Are there any other tools that you used, or that were really helpful, or any resources at college or while you were in college or medical school that were helpful as well?
Yeah, so there's a few. One is, I think, online with, honestly, forums and threads. There's like communities of people who are doing, whether it's medicine or something else, they're doing what you want to do. You can talk to them about it. Medicine has a particular one called Student Doctor Network, which is, I don't know how active it is anymore. People still post on it, but I don't know if it's as big of a deal. And it's a little bit of a double-edged sword, because on one hand, you get really practical, helpful advice. On the other hand, pre-med people, we're always anxious. We're always very like uptight about things. We worry about everything. So sometimes it puts you down a rabbit hole where it actually causes more stress and anxiety and comparison. So I would say, you can look to those resources, just don't put too much stock in them, and try to, it's your story, it's your life, it's going to be your application, and don't try to compare yourself too much to other people. But they give a lot of practical advice about what is the best study guide out there, what's the best resource, what do you think I should do about this career, pros and cons, career meaning specialties within medicine. So there's online stuff. At the school, there's, again, organizations either that are student run, or sometimes, the Office of Career Services. They usually have some sort of pre-med division, or at least people who are focused on that, because it's a very common route for a lot of students in college to want to go to medical school. Again, kind of a double-edged sword. I think there's some people who feel like pre-med advisors I think they're trying to be realistic, but sometimes they feel like they're overly pessimistic, or they felt like not supported by their pre-med advisors. And so I think you got to take that with a grain of salt too. And at the end of the day,
was very similar to that.
Yeah, too. It's like no one believes in you more than you do. And so take their advice, but maybe some people are just a hater, and you got to figure out another way, right? So I think that's a big thing too. And then Harvard at least had a great structure where they even paired you with people who are currently in medicine and had them be mentors to you, which I think is a resource I was lucky to have. I don't know if everybody has that arrangement. And then other resources. And then I think there's pipeline programs which are actually very helpful. So I think I wish there were more, but there's programs that exist that either are focused on a particular type of specialty, or just increasing, the pipeline to medicine in general, where they'll give you some of that exposure that maybe is not available at your school, but you can apply for a summer program that does something. There's a program, I think they renamed it, so I can look it up and tell you after, but it used to be called SMDEP. They might have renamed the acronym there, but it was a summer program you could apply to that happened across different colleges in the country, but I think through like a centralized application process, and then you could do like a pre-med advising program where you get very practical advice given to you at your stage of training for whatever the next step's going to be. I think that's mainly it.
Okay.
Might think of other stuff.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. That's dope. So I guess going back now to, because I feel like I'm jumping around a little bit, but
It's okay.
we're here.
Yeah.
So what you mentioned that you decided to do a master's degree. So why did you decide to do that before medical school?
Yeah, so it was during medical school, and I guess the part that I left out is when I went to college, something I was interested in was, now I'm around all these. I think a big eye-opening thing about going to a huge research university versus being, in my high school is that, we're all there to learn, and these are professors, they're educators, but a lot of their full-time job is really like to work in a lab or to do like these are where scientists live, right? Like people when I thought of a scientist as a kid, I thought they worked in like some laboratory that was like a private institution type of thing, that they just like
lab,
Dexter's lab in their garage or in their basement, or they just went to like this really expensive facility that all they did was research. And that stuff exists, but a lot of it happens at the university. And so I was really fascinated by that, and I did some summer programs where I got to work in labs that were more like biology related. One of them was bioengineering, but it really was kind of closer to the biology side. And the thing I was working on at the time was how to, actually, I'm not gonna get into it. I don't think it's gonna be too, to get to it. Okay. So one of the labs I worked in was how to do gene delivery to cardiomyocytes, which are cells of the heart. And the idea was just, the heart doesn't regenerate very well. So when you get a heart attack, you get a big scar on the heart. It doesn't really heal very well. And so there's a huge interest in medicine about how do we get the heart to heal itself better. And one of the labs I worked in a summer, they were trying to figure out ways that you could kind of like reprogram those cells in the heart to then be able to regenerate, and working on techniques to deliver gene editing technology to the heart. And so, it sounds like it is an amazing idea, but you end up working on a very small fundamental part of that. And so I was working on just how to get these genes into like lipid particles before we even delivered them. So, but it was cool. It was like cool to see like what happens, how does science actually work? And I started to think, maybe research is something that I want to do in my career, because it's a way to have a bigger scale impact on the world. I think taking care of patients is an amazing privilege. It's something that I feel really fortunate to do, but it is a case by case impact. So I see one patient face to face, and I could do something really amazing for their life, but it's one at a time. Whereas if you make a discovery, that could change things for millions of people.
Right, generations,
Exactly. And so I was kind of fascinated by that idea. And in college, I did research that was more related to my degree at the time. So then when I get into medical school, I was still interested in research, but I started to be more drawn to clinical research, which is instead of working with like mice or cells or in a laboratory, you're working with patients or patient data. And so through different experiences also in med school, I got to work on a clinical research project. And I was like, oh, this is really cool. It's really fascinating. And I want to get better at it. There's a lot of methodology with the statistics and the study design that I didn't really appreciate. I thought like, oh, you just run a clinical trial and you test the medicine and there's not much to think about. But there's a lot of nuances to doing rigorous, good research. And I wanted to get better at it. So I decided to get a degree. It was a master's in epidemiology and clinical research. So it's not an MPH, but it's kind of similar. But it was offered at Stanford, which is where I went to medical school. And it was a 5th year. So instead of doing 4 years in medical school, I did 5 and got this master's degree at the same time, which cut down on the total time. If I did that master's degree separately, it would have been a 2-year program. So it still was shorter than doing them sequentially, but it added on time to my training.
Is something like that unique to Stanford, or do medical schools offer something similar?
No, it's not unique. I think the particular degree, most people have, most places have an MPH, a Master's of Public Health. And the emphasis might be a little bit different, but I think epidemiology, public health, clinical research, there's a lot of transferable skills. And so if you want to find something like that, I bet there's something at a lot of schools. Whether there's support for, like I got the tuition covered through this scholarship that our school offered. So
love it.
But there's resources that were able to make that more feasible. And so whether you're able to do it in like a track instead of separately, and whether you get it covered and don't have to pay extra tuition, I think that depends on place to place. And I was very fortunate that it got covered.
I'm a firm believer in not paying for master's degrees.
Yeah.
Like, there's just finesse.
That could be a whole other talk. Yeah.
Yes.
It's this weird thing. Yeah. Because PhDs, they cover undergrad, there's a lot of options, but master's is expensive, and there's not even a lot of ways to pay for it. And there's not necessarily a lot of options you could look into for certain fields, unfortunately.
Yeah. Okay. So how would you say that your master's degree, or even maybe some of the opportunities you had in medical school, helped inform your specialty and where you ended up today?
Specialty, I kind of always liked cardiology. So going back to the what I've been saying before, math, science, physics, I think cardiology is the specialty. So I wouldn't say that the master's degree influenced my specialty choice specifically. I was always interested in cardiology because I think it's the one specialty that has the best integration of thinking about, the heart is a pump. It also has an electrical system that coordinates it. There's also like fluid dynamics in the heart. So it's really, for an engineering background, it's like the best organ system. There's some others, like nephrology is really cool. There's a lot of things interesting in pulmonology, the lungs. But cardiology is like for engineering nerds who go into medicine. It's like
oh, wow.
It's very clear.
I never thought about it like that. Yeah.
Like the things that you learn in physics about pressure and velocity and even like Ohm's law with resistance is how you think about blood pressure. Like V equals IR. It's like blood pressure equals cardiac output times systemic resistance. Yeah, we think about that stuff daily, like in the hospital. So it was kind of a no-brainer to go into it. But I think the master's degree influence is kind of what I see my career overall looking like. So I think specialty ends up being just one part of it, which is what I think I learned when I was trying to, I was like, I have so many interests. How do I put this all into one career? And I realized medicine can look a lot of different ways. And so cardiology is like the clinical specialty I want to do, but I could be in a private practice, or I can be in a major hospital seeing, patients who are referred there. Some cardiologists see patients only a day a week and they're otherwise in the lab. Like there's a lot of ways you could build it. So I think the master's degree kind of had me or it enabled me to pursue more of like a research track where I can hopefully do clinical research. Maybe one day I'll be running clinical trials in cardiology. And I think that's been very helpful for that part.
Okay. So you've chosen your specialty. You're going to do cardiology. What happens next?
So once you pick your specialty, the next step is to go through the application process for residency. And I guess I can just explain just the pathway to be clear. Residency is the first training that you do after medical school. So it's clinical training where every day you're just actually practicing medicine, but you're under the supervision of more senior physicians. And so you see the patients, you examine them, you write orders, you make treatment plans, but everything gets like signed off by someone who's overseeing it to make sure that everything's safe. And then some people subspecialize after residency, and they call that fellowship. Okay. So the actual specialties differ, but residency is always the first step, and then fellowship is if you choose to subspecialize after that.
Okay.
So yeah, in medical school, everyone picks a specialty, and then you apply for the matching process, which is kind of a crazy thing. But basically, every other job or every other school you apply, you get into places or you get offers, and then you choose what you want, right? You compare them, you make a decision. For residency and for a lot of fellowships, they go through the match process where in advance you make a list of where you want to go in order. And so you say, you know what, if it came down to it and I got into every place I want to go, my number one choice would be this one. And if I didn't get that one, then my number two choice would be this one. And my number three choice would be this one. And so you apply to a bunch of places, you hopefully get a lot of interviews, you go to the interviews. Before COVID, they were mostly in person. Now they're a lot of them are virtual. I think slowly they might make their way back to being in person again. You interview for med school too, by the way. But so after you apply, you get interviews, then you're able to make a rank list of all the places that you at least got to interview at. And then the programs themselves make a list also. They're like, I want this person number 1, this person number 2, this person number 3. And then you submit all of that to an algorithm, to the computer, and it gives everyone one spot. And you're tied to that spot, and you go. And that's it. There's no comparing options after getting decisions. You kind of just get one. And there's a big day, match day, where all across the U.S. people find out where they're going at the same time. It's usually a Friday in March.
Yeah. Like I definitely seen it on IG. Like all of these,
Yeah.
like they usually have some board. It's like I matched.
Yeah.
And it's just, yeah. So I guess what were some of the considerations you were thinking about for your top 3 that you had chosen?
Yeah, great question. So I'm from the New York area. I went to obviously Boston, or Harvard's in Boston, so I went to Boston, and then Stanford's in California, so I went to California. And so a big decision I had is, do I stay out here? Do I go back home? And I think I loved going to California. I think it's great. I also think it's really good to move different places and try different places. But I also think home is home. I think that's a really big thing. So even though I wasn't tied to necessarily coming back to New York, I definitely wanted my top like 5 places were all in the Northeast.
Okay.
And so it was between different New York City programs, Boston, Philly, kind of in that area. And so that was number 1, personal. Number 2, every program has its own culture. And so you kind of want to get a sense of what are the people there like? What is the vibe there like? What's their, how is it structured in a way that like promotes or supports a certain kind of culture? And then 3 is like, the education. Like, am I going to learn a lot? I want to make sure I'm exposed to a lot of patients, sick patients, so I can get good at being, a doctor who can take care of people and I can feel confident and independent by the end of my training. And I forgot to mention that the first step for being a cardiologist is actually to do general medicine training. So internal medicine is the residency I applied to. You don't apply to cardiology straight after medical school. So internal medicine is the same training that a primary care doctor would do. So it's 3 years. And then after that, you can kind of practice very general medicine where either in the office or in the hospital, you can take care of like a variety of different problems. But if you want to get really narrow and become niche at something, so if it's the kidneys, you go into nephrology after internal medicine. If you want to do heart medicine, then you go into cardiology. If you want to do hematology, which is the blood, or oncology, that's one specialty that does both, you go into hem-onc. So there's a huge number of people who do internal medicine, and then a lot of people then keep going afterwards to a fellowship, which is the next step. And it's a similar process where you do a match to get to fellowship.
Okay. And then how long is the fellowship process? And then what's the next step after that?
So it varies by specialty, but for my path specifically, internal medicine is 3 years, and then the fellowship for cardiology is 3 years. And then after that, if you want to be a general cardiologist, then you're done. You go to work and you get to go to practice. But there's even subspecialties of cardiology. If you want to specialize in electrophysiology or get some more imaging experience, or be an interventional cardiologist where you get to put stents into blocked arteries, then those are all additional 1 or 2 years after cardiology. So it adds up. It's 3 years plus 3 plus 1 or 2 for a lot of people who go into that field.
Right. And I'm thinking about the comment you made earlier around the training. So it's like you're still working and, learning these new specialties. And is that learning more hands-on, or is it still also textbook, or both?
That's a great question. It's very hands-on, but it's important to read on your own time. So like you're assigned to a shift. You go to work, you show up, you have to be there on time. There's a lot of just being a professional involved in the training, right? Like you have to be there for your team, for your patients, but you work a shift to a certain time. You see a certain number of patients, you write notes, you're writing orders, you're doing physical exams. It's all very hands-on. But then there's usually some curriculum where you go to lectures. Sometimes they'll be in the morning before you start your day. Sometimes they'll be around noon. So you eat lunch while you're getting a lecture or some kind of learning. And then you're expected to read on your own time to learn more about things. Because you read a lot, you study a lot in medical school. But when you're doing it in practice, there's a lot of stuff that you realize. Like, sure, you might say, you treat, this is very simple, but you treat a fever with Tylenol or treat pain with Tylenol, but then what's the dose? How do you dose that? So there's now, you go from this being theoretical to knowing I actually have to prescribe this. I got to know the side effects, the dosing, what medicines it shouldn't mix with. So you start to hone in on more practical studying to actually deal with the patients you take care of, or to refresh things that you haven't seen in a while or forgot, and you're honestly learning new things all the time. So reading's really important still.
What skills would you say are have been really helpful for you while doing this and thinking about the profession as like a whole person, like being more well-rounded. Like the example I'm thinking of is there's this trope that engineers don't know how to communicate, right?
Yeah.
And that's not necessarily something that you can learn in a book, right?
Yeah.
It's something that you develop or you can get better at, or you naturally have it. So what kind of skills do you think, maybe soft skills, are really important for someone going to the physician field to become a physician?
I think rapport with patients is like a really big thing, right? You're meeting people. Often it might be their worst day of their life. They're in the hospital for something tragic or something that's really bothering them. And they're meeting a stranger, and you got to instill the confidence that you're going to take care of them and things are going to be better. Or if they're not, you got to break that to them somehow, in a way that's still respectful, empathetic, and you're still showing that you're trying your best, right? So like that's very hard. I think in medical school, I didn't talk about this before, but med school is divided kind of into like just textbook classroom learning for the first half, and the second half is when you start doing more of these rotations where you're starting to join the teams. And I think that's when a lot of that stuff starts to come to the forefront of like, wow, maybe up until that point your training had not been like that focused on the soft skills, but once you get into the hospital, like just like any profession, you're working with people. It's like really important, and you're working with very sensitive situations with very vulnerable people, so it's even bigger. And I personally am an introvert, so I thought at one point I was like, I don't know, that might be hard for me to like connect with people, but I actually think it makes me a better doctor at the bedside, because I think I really value like the one-on-one conversations. I also understand not everyone's very comfortable meeting other people or being in certain settings, and so I think it's given me an extra sensitivity to dealing with patients. And I've gotten feedback that my bedside manner is one of my skills, and so I've been proud of that, but I still try to like keep that in mind and get better at it. And there are some, with everything, there's ways to teach it. Like I think some of it's natural, but there are ways to teach it. Like how do you carry yourself, introduce yourself? How do you address patients? How do you be mindful of like where you're, like, are you standing up while they're laying on a table or in a hospital bed? Like, how about you sit down, come to their level, don't stand in front of them in the door if you think they might be a little nervous. That makes it feel like you're closing them in. Addressing all the family in the room. Like there's all these very practical things, and our med school had a class literally called Practice of Medicine, and half of it was physical exam skills, like how do you examine someone the right way to actually diagnose the problem, and the other half is literally just how do you be around patients in a way that makes them feel comfortable. So there's teachable stuff, but it's also on you to like notice that that's a very important aspect, because some doctors still have terrible bedside manner,
Right.
and they come in, they talk for 5 minutes, they rush out the door, or they look like their hands on the door the whole time. And patients notice those things. I think if you're not mindful of it, you might forget.
Absolutely. And I think that's something too, especially when you think about the Black community or just communities of color in general. Sometimes there's just a built distrust of this field. So it's like being in tune of that, being aware of that, and then also just generally like, good manners and like bedside manner that you're talking about. So that's a really important skill. I think that's lost on even like a ton of other fields, right? Like just having that level of professionalism, and courtesy and respect for people always is like just like
Goes a long way.
Absolutely. Yeah. Okay. So where are you now? Where are you based? And maybe what are some of the things that you love about what you're doing today?
So in that path that I described from residency to fellowship, I'm at the end of my general fellowship, and I'm actually going to add one more year to do advanced echo. So that'll be my last one after this.
What's advanced echo?
There's also a transesophageal echocardiography, where you basically take an ultrasound probe, but you put it in a patient's mouth and into their esophagus, and you take pictures of the heart that way. And the reason is the heart sits kind of right in front of the esophagus, so if you put an ultrasound probe inside the body, you get way clearer pictures. You can see things that you can't see otherwise. And there's patients with really complicated, diseases or that they're born with or that they acquire as they get older, where they might have really complex abnormalities they were born with, or they might have had a lot of interventions, and some of the imaging is hard to interpret, hard to perform a good study, and so it's extra training to get really good at doing the more complicated types of cases, mostly focused on the transesophageal echocardiography. And it's actually a tool that is used to guide a lot of procedures also. And so historically, if you had a blocked artery or had a valve that wasn't working, you need to do heart surgery. A cardiothoracic surgeon needs to open the chest, get inside the heart, do an operation, close the chest. And now we're getting pretty incredible at the things that we can do. It's called transcatheter, but meaning using a catheter, using a very thin flexible tube that you put into an artery or a vein, either in the wrist or in the leg, and you can literally deploy a stent, which is like a thin tube that can unblock an artery and keep it open. You can put in a whole new valve through a catheter, and a lot of those techniques, particularly the valve ones, are guided with an ultrasound image. And so working with the proceduralist is also part of that training and part of that specialty. So that's why I'm doing it, to get better skills with that. Because I like echo. It's one of the cool parts of cardiology.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah. And then to answer your question about what I like doing every day now, I still like taking care of patients. It's still really nice to see them in the office. Like, Thanksgiving just passed. When I saw patients this week, just catching up, like, how was your Thanksgiving? Like, what did you do? Them asking me what I'm doing. One of my patients lives like in my neighborhood, I found out, and
wow.
we realized that together, and that was like kind of a cool thing. But yeah, I still think, even though I've learned a lot, done a lot, and the technical stuff has been really cool and has been changing, at the end of the day, the patient interactions has been the really cool part. And then I still, I haven't talked much about what research I'm doing right now, but I still have like a interest in doing research, but now I've been focused more on, there's a lot of disparities in healthcare. So either interventions that we know are really helpful for a particular cardiovascular disease, but that are applied unequally to people. So like maybe people from, lower socioeconomic backgrounds are not getting it as often. Maybe people from certain underrepresented racial groups are not getting it as often. And now I've kind of been focusing more on like, how can we use different data sets or registries or real world practice to better understand what are the like barriers to some of that care? How can we do it better? And, some of it's just describing the differences that we might not have known. Like, hey, look, it turns out Black patients don't get ablations for atrial fibrillation as often as white patients. Like, you need to like, it might sound like not surprising, but some people don't know that. And you want to use the data to show that, hey, this is a problem that exists. But then the next step is figuring out why is that the cause? Why is that the case? And you can look into, is it mediated by, income? Like, is there something about resources that some people can't afford that other people can? Is it mediated by geography, where they live, and proximity to like certain specialty care? Or you can interview. I don't do as much of the interview type of research, but you can do interviews with patients and providers to find out, like, are there things that we can't capture in a data set that are like implicit bias or mistrust of the medical system, like you mentioned, that are actually affecting people's decisions to go with what a doctor is deciding, or that doctor deciding to even recommend that in the first place. So there's a lot of nuance in it, and I think to me that's been where I kind of want to focus my efforts now. So I spend some of my time doing research, some of it doing clinical work at this part of my training. Yeah.
Okay. So I guess thinking maybe like future 5, 10, 15 years, like do you think you would ever go into teaching, or what does the that like long-term plan look like for you?
Yeah, so I think there's teaching in medicine that happens still in a classroom, like with medical students. I think that's cool. I've done a lot of that before. I think that's not where I see myself doing a majority of my effort, because a lot of teaching happens, to our point earlier about training is like experiential, right?
Yeah.
A lot of the teaching happens in real time at the patient's bedside while we're discussing the plan. You need someone to give you feedback about, like, actually, I see where you're going with that, but here's how you should think about it, because this is something that you weren't considering, and actually this is important, right? So there's ways to do teaching at the bedside and in practice that I think is more impactful, more fun, and honestly just easier to integrate into the type of career that I want, where I want to be I want to be practicing medicine, but at an academic facility. And so there will be trainees working with me. And so I think that's an easy way to teach them as we go. But then I want some of the days of my week to be spent pursuing research interests, where I get to like ask questions and pursue a project that hopefully answers that question. And, that's a whole other type of career where, you need to get funding to support that research. A lot of that can come from the government, the NIH, the National Institutes of Health. And so there's a lot of other skills that through my master's and through my research training now that I'm honing for that part of things, like how to write a grant to get money to do the project I want to do. And that part's a little bit more uncertain. I think there's always patients who need doctors. There's a shortage of doctors. And so I'm not worried about finding enough clinical work to do.
Yeah.
But I think the, ability to do research, especially with the current administration, is a little bit more uncertain. And that's okay with me, because at the end of the day, I still love taking care of patients so much that if I never was able to fund myself to do research, I'm still fine. I can do have a very great career doing something I love. But if I'm able to throw in that extra piece, it's like the cherry on top.
Right. Yeah. And it goes back to the thread you've been kind of saying all along, which is this ability to make impact in a greater way than just the one-on-one patient relationship too. So that makes sense.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So I think we'll wrap with this last question, which is like our capstone, the name of this series. So what is it that you feel you wish you knew when you were in college before kind of going down this path that you're in here now?
I wish that I knew the importance of mentorship. I think I figured it out along the way. And I think I was seeking out mentorship at different points, but maybe just not as consciously. But again, it is a very clear path where you could look it up now and know exactly what you have to do. There are those online forums where you can look to see what people are advising. But I think nothing beats finding people who are doing what you want to do and or where you want to be, whether it's they're now at med school and I'm not yet, right? Or whether it's they're the dean of a medical school and I'm still a med student, right? So there can be different timelines, but I think the importance of seeking those people out and just being open to trying to have conversations about their career. I wish I just did more of that earlier on, but luckily I figured it out at some point along the way.
Yeah. Right. And you engaged those folks when you needed them too.
Yeah.
So cool. All right. Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think mentorship is so important. And it's one of the things that, at B&B that we try to always be able to connect students with folks that are along the path that they're thinking of, or even completely different than what they're thinking of. I think one of the things that's great about college is that you find out what you like, but also what you don't like. And sometimes those mentors can be there to help open those doors too. So that's awesome.
Yeah, for sure.
So Brian, thank you so much for joining us today. I learned a ton about medicine. We were joking earlier that the extent of that is like Grey's Anatomy, ER, like
The Pit has gotten a lot of
the Pit is
great
really
reviews
good.
for accuracy. I haven't seen it actually. I saw one episode, which is good.
Yeah.
Scrubs is my show still.
I have not seen Scrubs. That maybe I need to add to the list. I liked The Pit because it goes through just one day. And
yeah,
just
it's 24-hour,
craziness, of like just that one series. Yeah, no, that all medicine shows. Love it.
It's good stuff. But yeah, thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun. I hope it was helpful. But for the watchers
watchers, listeners.
Watchers, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for having me. This is a lot of fun. Glad to spend the morning talking.
Cool. All right. Thank you.